Hello, thank you for joining us. Oh, I have a very loud voice, so I always have to remind myself not to put the mic very close.
I might have louder voice.
Yeah, I think we need to wake up the room, so it's good. Thank you for the great introduction, as usual. This guy is amazing. So, as was mentioned, everyone, what we're going to be discussing is what it takes to achieve mega growth and build a unicorn in 2025. So I want to give you a few numbers here so you can grasp the magnitude of the amount of unicorns that are in existence in the world right now. As of 2024, there are over 1,549 unicorns globally, spanning around 53 countries and 291 cities. You can calculate how much money that is. This marks a notable increase from previous years, with the number rising significantly since the year 2019, where the number of unicorns in that year was 494 unicorns only. So that's 4x increase. So with Andy here, we'll be discussing what it takes to achieve rapid growth, from securing the right funding to navigating market dynamics and building a sustainable business model that attracts both investors and customers. This session will explore the strategies, challenges, and key factors involved in scaling a startup into a unicorn in the year 2025, or in general, actually. But before I begin, I wanted to do a small poll of our audience so we can really benefit from Andy's great experience here. So my question is, in the audience, who here is a business owner, works in a startup, or wants to know, as a business owner, as a startup, how to build a unicorn company?
So if you're a founder or a business owner, right?
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
That's a good amount, yeah.
Right.
Okay, awesome. And who in the audience is an investor or wants to learn more about investing and having the foresight?
Great. Now you've been exposed. They'll come after you.
Okay, I think we have more startups or business owners than investors, but we'll do a mix of both so that everyone can benefit from this session. So before we begin, I'd like Andy to make a small introduction just so the audience can be
Maybe a fun fact. What do you think about that? I think that would be cool, right? A fun fact is, this trip coming to Abu Dhabi, I was looking at my passport. I was like, just curious where I've been. So the last 10 years, I've been to UAE more than any other country on earth. I thought that's pretty interesting. And by the way, you're thinking, oh, this guy probably lives like 2 hours away. No, I live in the San Francisco area. It took me a while to get here. So definitely it's not a trip of convenience, right? It's a trip with a lot of intention. And I kind of look back in my career based on the passport exercise that I did. So before that, time in Singapore. So I've been traveling to Singapore. That was the highest frequency country. Before that, China. Before that, New York. I'm not sure if this is a leading or lagging indicator of global economy, but certainly there's some kind of indicator. I'll leave it up to you.
Certainly, I agree. All right, so let's begin with the question that I had for both investors and entrepreneurs, and I think everyone can benefit from this one. So as a VC, what are you looking for in a company before you invest in it? How do you evaluate startups for potential unicorn status? Are there any metrics that are stable, or are they ever changing for you?
So first of all, just as kind of as background, I'm an early stage investor. I typically invest in two people and a piece of paper, and sometimes with a dog, sometimes without a dog, right? So very early, and I tend to gravitate myself towards, what I call the bleeding edge, right? So it's beyond deep tech. Basically, the things I invest in, they don't really materialize until 5-10 years later. So your question is good, which is what am I looking for? And I could tell you pretty much at that level, that stage, is very difficult to tell. So I oftentimes think about, instead of nurture versus nature, you both identify the unicorn as well as raising it. So how do I identify unicorns? There are three things I look for. One, I look for companies that will go after a very large market, right? Very large market, because market is one of those things I can change and they can change. So large end market. Number two, we want to deal with founders who are both passionate about the business as well as have some knowledge. They don't necessarily have to be an expert, right? Sometimes having too much knowledge is a setback. There's a US, we have a saying, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Sometimes it's a bad thing, but sometimes it's a good thing. It turns out for early stage investing, you don't know what you don't know is a good thing because you will try things that have failed before, but suddenly is workable now when you try it. Lastly, what I look for is a product or some sort of advantage they have that is proprietary against their competitors. So those are the three things I look for. I look for the market, I look for the team, and I look for the specific characteristics of the product.
I think this is a good way to kick it off, just to know these basics. But speaking to the entrepreneurs in the audience here, I think a lot of them would want to know what the potential pitfalls for entrepreneurs when it comes to fundraising, especially in a more competitive market, as you said.
Right. So we as a fund, Draper Associates, we fund about 20 to 30 startups a year. So we have volume. This is early sort of, pre-seed, seed stage companies. I would say looking back, some of the most disappointing fundraise that I have for the founders, not for me, but equally for me, is when founders lose track of the most important thing in the fundraise, and that is to capitalize the business, right? That is the most important thing because as you're a founder, you are probably, you've identified a highly attractive opportunity, right? The only thing you lack is funding. Whether you get stuck on terms or valuation and cause you to not capitalize or delay time, that will cost you more than anything else. So my suggestion is to find the right investor and then don't get hung up on the terms. And the other thing is, there's a class that I teach in Silicon Valley. It's called Fundraising and Dating, right? Believe it or not, it is a very fun class and useful class. In dating, there's a concept of getting settled, right? You don't want to settle. But when you're fundraising, you actually want to make sure you don't inadvertently sort of wait for that perfect match, right? You actually do want to find, mathematically, I call that the local maximum instead of global maximum. People can spend a lifetime looking for that global maximum. Don't do that. So local maximum is good.
Okay, so of course, all of us can agree that being a unicorn or becoming a unicorn is hard enough. But I think people rarely talk about remaining as a unicorn company. Do you think you've reached that status already? Staying on that pedestal, let's say, is that challenging as well? And how do you assess the long-term sustainability of a business in general?
Interesting enough, if you're a startup, you're successful, right? And successful, in the early stages mean that you have a high valuation, you have your revenue, whatever. You're not really done yet. You're just getting started. But if you trace back, I could guarantee you 9 out of 10 startups, why you are successful, it's because something intrinsic in you, the founder, right? It could be the people, it could be the culture. So Steve Jobs has once said, A players hire A players. B players, who do they hire? The audience? This is a smart audience. What do B players hire? C players. They don't hire B players, right? So I think it's really important you remember if you're successful, it's only temporary. As a startup, you got to keep the culture, right? The culture is what allows you to keep winning.
Let's speak to the investors a little bit. So investors are often seen as a source of financial backing.
I feel like they should raise their hands again so the
we
founders
know
could identify them after the meeting. Please don't be shy. Raise your hands. Yes.
Investors in the audience.
Raise them high and proud. All right, very good.
So all of the entrepreneurs here, these are
you know who to look for. All right, good.
Your ladies and your guys.
You're welcome. I'm doing you a favor. I'll do you a solid. All right.
So I think these gentlemen and the ladies can agree that usually investors are looked at as, financial backers. But the value they bring, I think you can agree, Andy, extends far beyond that. So in your experience, what are the most effective ways that you've found that investors can actively support founders during challenging periods, and not just funding? So this can include strategic decision-making, team building, and navigating market shifts is also a good one.
Hopefully by now you've realized I like to use analogies. So about 23 years ago, I inadvertently climbed Kilimanjaro. This was after business school. We decided to go to Africa, and we said, well, what are we going to do? Well, there was a mountain. We should go climb it. So we showed up, no idea, right? So sometimes you will bump into founders like that. They kind of embark on a big journey. And these are great founders, right? No fault of their own. They just weren't exactly prepared. So my job as an investor in those situations is to be a good guide, right? So I just remember as we were climbing, oh my gosh, we wanted to turn back every 5-6 hours, and it gets more and more difficult, right? Investors are not porters. We don't qualify to be porters. We are not even qualified to be your guide for the whole journey. Some of us will come in as part of the journey to guide you. My rule of thumb for being a good investor and a board member is what I call, my doctor friends would tell me, do no harm, okay? Because it's their journey. In fact, they're the experts. I'm not the expert. I'm a financial backer. I'm a guide. I've seen this journey many times before, but it's never the same journey, interesting enough, right? So I think the most important thing is we kind of keep them on track. When things are so bad, I want to remind them, I've seen other journeys got even worse and they turn around. And when things are so good, don't get your head so big, because I've seen many people fall off the top of a cliff, one wrong step. So just keep at it.
And speaking of what you've seen and your breadth of experience, obviously, in the investing field, I'm curious, what is the company that you view as your best investment? I know your portfolio includes companies like Telegram, like Ledger, but in your view, what characteristics did that company that you view was your best investment have?
Tricky question. That's almost like, which baby do you have? I only have two, right? That you like the most. But I always like to say, people love the babies. When you're young, they're like, oh, so cute, right? So I'll use my latest unicorn that was born this year, right? Unexpectedly. It was a planned baby, but unexpectedly became a unicorn. It's a company by the name of Oklo. It's two MIT engineers. So I went to school there. I went to visit, and I met them 10, 11 years ago. They were husband-wife team. That's nice. Actually, I have a decent record with husband and wife teams. Both engineers, both nuclear engineers, right? Generally, that's not a very hot department. Definitely not 10 years ago. So to find two of them, husband and wife, that's kind of unique. 10 years later, they got into data center. As you know, the rest was history, because AI data centers are hot, so they went public, and people now realize, oh my gosh, this technology is great. We could use it. It's clean. We don't need transmission distribution. So they became a unicorn. So I love the new baby.
Yeah, sounds good. I've done some research about some of your classes, and one thing that you said, and that really, I think people will be curious about as well, is that you've invested in a company, and you're going to that first board meeting, and you said after you've just invested, it's a very stressful meeting that usually brings bad news. So can you expand on that? And do you have advice for early investors going into that first meeting after they've just,
Lena's very polite. Online, you will see something more vulgar, like the oh shit moment, right? My recommendation is actually for the entrepreneurs to be more transparent, let us know all the challenges. We are professional investors. A lot of times, you'd be surprised how much we could stomach. What is difficult for us to stomach oftentimes is the surprises, right? And then our advice to the other investors, my personal brand is probably the most important thing. If I have a deal that's not doing so good or whatever, I would always tell the new investors, because I don't want to accidentally ruin them for the next deal.
Last question, I'm going to give it to the audience. Do we want to give that to the entrepreneurs? Yes?
Make some noise. You have to advocate for yourself. You can't just sit there.
Or to the technology? I think I'll end it with just the top 3 things that you've learned throughout your years.
Yeah.
And maybe the advice to the entrepreneurs that are in the audience, their top do's and don'ts. Just one here and one there.
For entrepreneurs, the do's and don'ts. I think it's a relationship building. It goes back to the dating experience, right? You really want to make sure it's the right fit. You don't want to get in business with the wrong people. So I think building that relationship and really build that trust over time is the way to go. And whatever you do, make sure you stay consistent, right? So that's probably the best generic advice I would give.
All right. Unfortunately, our time is up. Everyone, let's please give a hand for Andy Tang from Draper
Thank you.
Associates.
Can I just implore you on one last thing?
No. Here.
So it says Draper Associates. Give me your best pitch, all right? So if you're an entrepreneur, come talk to me afterwards. You could give me your best pitch, and then for the best pitch, I'll give you this ball. All right?
Awesome.
Thank
It'll be
you.
so fun. Thank you.